Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business.
Well, welcome everyone to the Speaker Launcher Quarterly Teleclass. From presentation to publish, getting your book in print. I'm your host, Jane Atkinson, and with me today on the line is the CEO of Greenleaf Publishing Group, Clint Greenleaf. Welcome, Clint.
Thanks so much for having me, Jane.
Well, I'm really excited to hear some of the interesting things that are shifting and changing with the publishing industry. But first tell us, how did you come to get into this business in the first place and be the CEO and chair of this company?
Sure. Well, the easiest way to become CEO of any company is to start it, and that was my ultimate goal. But I'll give you a little bit more of the history just to go back a little bit. I had been an accountant at Deloitte & Touche in the Cleveland office in the late 90s. And although I did earn my CPA while I was there, I really hated accounting. It wasn't a whole lot of fun. And during the time I was there, some friends had kind of dared me into writing a book on how to dress, on how to tie your tie, and how to shine your shoes, a lot of the tips I'd learned with the Marines when I was in college. And so I thought, well, how hard can it be to write a book? So during some of my downtime, I put together a 28-page booklet that I illustrated myself on how to tie a tie and how to shine your shoes. And it was meant entirely to be a joke, and I'd bet my buddies a keg of beer that I could actually do this. They saw the 28-page book and got a little bit annoyed. They gave me a keg of Natty Light, which isn't really the best beer. But they did that, and so I had this book that started to sell while I was an accountant at Deloitte. And the book started to sell pretty well. I was moving about 50 to 100 copies a day out of a little P.O. box from one little classified ad. It was a fun process, and I was making a lot more money doing that than I was being an accountant. I liked the publishing business, and I hated accounting. So it's kind of a simple decision for me to make. So at the ripe old age of 22, I retired and started a publishing company.
Wow. So back then, and I probably met you, I would say close to 10 years ago now, and you were kind of this young up-and-comer of the industry, and now you're like the old man. You've been
right. I went
from
being a young punk to just a punk now. And it's not as much fun. But yeah, it's almost been 13 years now, so we've been at this for a while now.
Wow. Well, that's terrific, and I know that you've had some really great success. Give us a little bit of an overview of Greenleaf Publishing, and we're going to get into the different publishing models, so we'll talk about where you fit in that model afterwards. So, what's your brand of publishing?
Sure. So our model is a little bit different. We're kind of a hybrid model between traditional publishing and the self-publishing model. We try and grow our clients and our books into becoming the best possible product and a moneymaker for not just their clients, but also for us as well. When we focus on both sides, it's a much better deal for us and for our clients as well. But we can kind of go through that as we talk about the different models. It's probably easier to see what the other guys do first and then see that we try to take the best pieces of each option. The fact that our clients own all their rights, but they have the high-quality distribution, the high-quality production from the major houses.
Okay. So let's talk through. Let's start with the big houses and kind of work our way backwards to self-publishing. What are the options for people who might be on the line who are either have a book already and are thinking about what to do with it, the manuscript, or they're thinking about writing one?
Sure. So I guess the first most important question is that what are your goals? Why are you actually thinking about doing a book? And that's really critical to understand, because if you don't know the answer to that, it's going to be hard to pick the best option for you. And just to be clear, traditional publishing is right for a lot of people, as is self-publishing right for a lot of people, and all the different options are right for a lot of different people. So when you know your goals on the front end, it's a lot easier to go through that, and we'll kind of touch on some of these as we go. But the traditional publishing is what everyone thinks of when they think of book publishing. It's Random House, it's Pearson, which is Penguin, and some of the big names, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, etc. And that is the traditional model where you take your book idea, you sell your rights to the publisher. They buy the rights to your work, and then they will do whatever they see fit with it, hopefully publish it and sell a lot of copies of it. But in exchange for giving them the rights, they will give you an advance usually, and then a percentage of royalties for each book sold. So it's a very small upfront investment, in that you basically just pay to get the book produced. And once the book, you basically just pay to get the book in the hands of the editors. You do not pay to get it produced. Once the editors get it, they pay for the book to be produced. They pay for all the editorial costs, the printing, the distribution. You still pay for the marketing costs, but that's going to be the case with every publishing option you hear. And all too often, people make the false assumption of assuming that once I get with a big publisher, then they're going to pay for my marketing costs, and that's just not the case.
It might be for the odd one or two book, and then that's about it. The authors are paying. In most of our scenarios, and we're mostly talking nonfiction, most of our scenarios, the author would be the one that would cough up the marketing budget. Do you think anybody, do you think, I don't know, who's a big name author, do you think everyone is paying their own marketing costs no matter who they are?
Most of them get to pay the majority of it. Someone like a John Grisham or a Tom Clancy gets a pretty big marketing budget from the publisher.
Okay.
But in most cases, even the pretty big name folks still use their advances to cover the marketing costs.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's not that lottery ticket payday where you expect to get an 8-figure check and sit back and smile.
Right.
Usually, most advances now are a lot smaller, so it's usually used for marketing costs.
And so, is the buck a book number a good number? If you go with a big name publisher, can you expect to make a buck a book? Is that the right number?
Well, that's a good question. Let's hit money on that real quick. We can jump into that. There is no such thing as an average advance, but the average, if there is one, and I was hard-pressed to answer, I'd say about $10,000 is probably the standard advance, the most common one. And then that's a prepayment of royalties, basically. So royalties are usually about 10% to 15% for hardcover books and 6 to 10% of paperback books. Okay. A really important calculation there is the way that they calculate it. Very few publishers now pay off of the gross amount or the list price of the book. Now almost everybody pays the 10 to 15% off of the net price, and that's a big difference. So on a $15 cover price book, instead of getting 10% of that, or $1.50, you're going to get 10% of the net amount, which is probably going to be $7.50, and the 10% of that works out to 75 cents. So depending on the cover price of the book, you can still hope to get that buck a book, but that's pretty impressive if you can get that much. Most people are paying more in the 50 to 75 cents a book rate.
Okay. So now maybe we should stop here and say, why would you want to go with a Random House or a Wiley or one of those bigger name publishers? What would be the true reason if we boiled it all down?
Sure. Well, the most important one I think is cash is tight. If you don't want to invest in your own project and you want someone else to be the investor in it, looking for a major publisher is a good idea. Creative control is not something you will keep, but if you don't care about creative control, who really cares, right? Not a big deal. Timeline, they talk about a 18 to 36 month timeline, and it usually works out to more like about 24 months or 2 years to get a book from the time you sign the deal with a major publisher to see it actually in your hands. And that can take a long time, so if timeline is not that important to you too, it doesn't really matter.
Okay. What about credibility? Do you think that your book having a name on it like whoever is the most credible way you could go, or does it really matter anymore these days?
Yeah, I would argue that it does not matter, and to illustrate that point, I'd like everyone on the call to think really hard about the last Simon & Schuster book that they've read, or the last HarperCollins book that they've read.
Okay.
Back in the day, it used to really matter if you could decide, I only read HarperCollins books. But it's no longer the Ford Chevy world. My dad was a Ford man. He drove Ford cars only, would never even think about driving a Chevy. Now he just cares about the best darn car out there. And the book world has certainly made that leap too. So instead of it being the publisher's job to give credibility to the author, it's the author's platform job to give credibility to the author. I would basically say that if Jim Collins puts out the next business book out there and does it under an imprint, anything other than Al-Qaeda Press, basically, people will go out and buy the book. They don't really care, and they might not even notice if it in fact is. In most cases, you want the author, you want the content. If there's a really good book that you want to find on how to help someone who's got the common cold and you've got the cold and you want to go out and buy the book, you don't really care who published that book. You want the book.
Okay.
So I think the
Seth
credibility
Godin just blogged about the idea that he was never going to go to press traditionally again.
Right,
So,
and I think Seth is going to be the first of many to make that kind of announcement.
Interesting.
Because for Seth to give up so much money, and Seth has a different deal than the average bear, right? Seth is probably getting more like $1 or $2, maybe even, per book sold.
Right.
But when you think about it, if he self-publishes or does it on his own, independently, he can make a lot more money, more like $4 or $5 a book, and he doesn't really need to deal with all the hassles of the traditional houses, because all you're really paying for is all their overhead. Their distribution has been matched by others now. That's something that we took a very serious role in doing, and a lot of other folks do it too. So you don't need the Random House distribution model. There's a lot of folks who do sell in airports and that kind of stuff as well.
Now, wouldn't you say that when you're an author, distribution is probably the most difficult thing? Like, writing the book, obviously, that's a little bit difficult, but compared to distribution, it's probably one of the easier parts of the whole process.
Yeah, I think usually when you're done writing the book, you smile and you say, wow, I'm 15% of the way there, it's great. And most people think that they're probably about 95% of the way there.
Right.
I'd say selling the book in general, and that may mean back of the room selling for a speaker, that may mean a bulk sale to a client, or it could just be traditional distribution through the major online stores and the major physical stores and airports and all those other places.
Okay.
And all that kind of stuff can be really complicated. It's not a simple process. And in fact, a lot of people will say, and can ask the question and say, do I really want to be in bookstores? I'm giving up a big portion of my proceeds. Is it really worth it for me to get that extra reach? And that's really an important question, because it's not right for everybody. But for those for whom it is correct, it is right. It can be a great tool to leverage the sales.
And I can certainly share from my own experience with the Wealthy Speaker, which I have worked distribution through you on, that the Wealthy Speaker being such a specialty item, that will be something I will continue to debate over the next 5 years as whether or not that was a mistake moving it out into bookstores at all. Because it is such specialty. I have built the momentum mostly myself. I'm the one probably driving a lot of those bookstore sales anyway. So, it's, Clint and I are open enough to say, you know what, I don't know if this was as good an idea as I thought it was way back when we first started working together a long time ago. And that's what I really appreciate about Greenleaf, is that you guys are not attached to any particular idea. You really kind of go with the way the industry is going and with the flow, and I appreciate that. But you mentioned something a second ago that I really wanted to capitalize on. Back of the room sales. If you get picked up by a publishing house, they are probably picking up you as a professional speaker because they think back of the room sales is going to sell hundreds, if not thousands of books at a time for them. Is that correct, Clint?
That's exactly right. And there are some predatory publishers out there with long-time distinguished names who have really kind of been preying on speakers. And I've kind of made it my personal mission to try and stop this as much as possible. What happens is they'll offer in advance, let's say $10,000 to a speaker. And they'll say, here, you just write your book and we'll do it. It'll be great. And hidden somewhere in the back of the book, or back of the contract, is a promise from you to go out and buy, at 50% of cover price, 5,000 units from the publisher. Well, if you know that you're getting $10,000, but you're promising to buy 5,000 units at, say, it's $25 books, so $12.50 a book, you're going to start spending a large amount of money with these guys, probably close to $60,000. To buy your books back from these guys.
Wow.
And so if you're going to do that, you're going to more than pay for your advance. So you're basically paying someone to vanity publish your book, which is a really dangerous game. And there's a lot of ways out of those contracts. I've helped a lot of friends try to navigate their way through those, but it's really important to make sure that you understand why someone wants your book. If they're going to force you to buy the book back from them at 50% of cover price so you can sell it back of room for a slight discount, you're not going to make a whole lot of money on it. And that's really can be a very damaging side, especially if you're mandated by contract to buy those books back from them, especially if you don't have the sales for it.
So what I'm taking from that is read your contract. Make sure that you know why did you come to me? What is it that you're hoping to gain from this? Obviously, they're in it to make money, and we'll talk a little bit about the way the this big, giant, dysfunctional industry is changing here shortly. Okay, so we've talked about traditional publishers, and maybe we should swing all the way to self-publishing, and then we'll come back to the middle with the hybrid. How's that?
Sure. Let me jump on one last piece for how to do traditional publishing, if in fact it does sound good for you. There's a book by Jeff Herman called Jeff Herman's Book Guide to Publishers, Agents, Editors, and Literary Agents. I think there's a new one coming out very soon for 2011. If not, the 2010 version still works. It's a great book, and it will tell you all the different ways you can write a query letter. A query letter is kind of your first date. You just want to send a one-page letter to these agents and say, hey, I'd like for you to consider picking up my book. Once an agent accepts your book, they accept about 1 or 2% of what they see. But once an agent picks up your book, an agent will then rep you to the major houses and try and sell you. They'll get about 15% of the deal price. But it's still an important aspect to make sure you have an agent fighting for your own best interests if you want to do traditional publishing.
Okay, so good point to maybe not be going in it by yourself, to have somebody who's knowledgeable there. But, you know, the way I look at that is that's just more people taking their chunk of the pie.
Right.
And once it gets published, there seems to be even more after that. So, okay, so let's swing all the way. Let's say I have my book, it's almost finished, and I just really want to actually make some money from my book, and I want to be able to present myself as being an expert and being a credible author. So I decide, all right, I'm going to self-publish. Let's talk about the pros and cons of that.
Sure. So self-publishing is kind of neat because you're starting your own business. Usually it's a cottage-type business, something you can start out of the privacy of your own home. And of course, the infamous Dan Pointer's book, The Self-Publishing Manual, is probably the Bible if you want to consider self-publishing. The way self-publishing works is you're kind of the general contractor on your book project. So you write the book, and then you have to go out and find an editor. You want to find designers to help you design the interior and the front cover of the book. You'll go out and you'll interview printers and find the right printer for your book. And then at some point you'll go out and interview people to help you market it, as well as distributors to try and go out and help sell your book to the major outlets that are out there. So there's a really complicated way of looking at this where you do all the compliance work. That's the ISBN, the kind of social security number for your book. You deal with the barcode, you deal with all those pieces. And Dan's book does a really good job explaining this. The neat part is that you own the whole process. So you're really intimately aware with it. You know exactly what you want, and you get editorial control. So when you sell to a major house, you give up the editorial control, you give up the design control. In this case, if you want to have a picture of you doing jazz hands on the front cover of the book, I'm personally going to tell you, please don't. But if that's something that you really want to do, if you're self-publishing, you get total control over that. And if the major traditional house wants to do a picture of a squirrel on the front cover of your book, you don't have much say to say no on that.
Right. And even titles you can't control. So, and if we have time, I'd like to come back to book covers, some do's and don'ts, just based on that little jazz hands idea there. That was awesome. Okay, so, and you may decide that your sole distribution is going to be your own website and Amazon, and that's that, right? You may not even go down that road of trying to get it into the bookstores. What do you think? Do you think it's to anyone's detriment not getting into the bookstores at this stage of the game?
I think for some people they need to be in the bookstores. If your book is meant to be kind of a billboard for you, if you really want people to see you and think, wow, this is someone who I might want to go out and hire for either a speaking gig or for a consulting project, it probably makes sense to have bookstore distribution because you want people to see your face as many times as possible, see your name as often as possible. But if you've got a really, really niche title, if you don't think the bookstores are going to carry it, if a distributor won't take it, or if you're somehow limited on what you can do, there's no harm at all in just selling the book on Amazon and on your website. I'd say that most people would prefer to buy the book on Amazon than from your website because they don't want to enter their information in one more time. They're pretty comfortable doing it on Amazon. So I think every book should be on Amazon all the time. That's becoming almost ubiquitous now for everybody to order a book. But the bookstore model still exists, and there's still some benefits from it. You know, when you're in an airport and you know you're going to be on a plane for a while, you might not be able to fire up your Kindle or your iPad during takeoff, and you might just want to actually read a physical book. So there's still some value in having that bookstore distribution if it's valuable to you. But if you're just selling the book just as a one-off item, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good.
Okay, so we've got the idea that you can go out and seek a big-name publisher. You'll probably need an agent in order to do that, and you're not going to make a lot of money on each book. It may give you a slight edge in terms of credibility, but we're thinking maybe not as much as back in the day. And you're going to have somebody else handle a lot of the printing costs and what have you, and you need to read the fine print on that contract. Or you can swing over and do self-publishing, which is you running the show, general contractor. If you've been as lucky as I have, you get some people on board that can work through the process with you. My editor, Green Onion, Catherine Leak at Green Onion Publishing, she basically walked through the whole process for me. So a really good partner can help you do some of those things. Because I've self-published and I've worked through Greenleaf, so I've got kind of both ends of it. And then getting distribution, I think, is the main challenge when you self-publish. And so let's go to the middle option, which is kind of the hybrid version, which is, now there's a lot of people in the hybrid game, so maybe we need to differentiate between, say, Greenleaf and other types of companies.
Sure. Generally, there's, the one way to look at hybrid is kind of that print-on-demand and e-book model, and there's a lot of people doing that. If you want to just have a book as a print-on-demand only title, make sure that your goals are aligned with that. We talked early on about goals. What do you want out of a book? If you want to become a New York Times bestseller, and if you want to have a book scream that you are the ultimate authority in classiness, a print-on-demand book might not get you there. Usually the quality is a little bit less. They're usually paperbacks. Print-on-demand can sometimes limit your big distribution potential as well, in that most bookstores will not carry print-on-demand books. But that's kind of the big space that a lot of companies are taking over, and that's almost becoming a really, really red ocean, if you will, in that a lot of people are fighting for that kind of ability to get into the e-book and print-on-demand world. Companies like Lulu and Lightning Source and Creative Space and Author Solutions are all print-on-demand companies that do that. But Creative Space is owned by Amazon. Lightning Source is owned by Ingram. And they all do a good job for you. They can help you get up on Amazon pretty quickly if you don't want to carry an inventory, which can be really nice if you don't have a whole lot of space to store books, or you don't want to deal with the cost of storing that up. You'll make less money per book, but you can still get your book out there.
So let's go through the three options on a dollar per book basis. Let's say if it's really good situation, the big name publisher, you're making $1 a book, and let's say on self-publishing, I don't know, what, $10 a book? Could
yeah, very easily. Yeah, if you're going to sell it on your own, you could very easily make $10, $15 a book.
Okay.
In theory, you'll sell fewer books than you would through traditional publishing. Is what they'll tell you, at least, and I'm not sure that's the case. But if you're going to sell only on your website, you'll probably sell fewer books total than you would if you were traditionally published in every bookstore in the country.
Okay. So let's say print on demand, maybe what, $5 a book or something?
Yeah, maybe 3 to 5 is probably a good number.
Okay. All right. So just so people understand where the money lies, and print on demand, you're not looking as quite as much outlay as you would if you self-publish either.
Right.
It's not all front-end outlay.
We've used all these options before. When I first got started, I turned my book into a traditionally published book and sold the rights to that. Got about 28 cents a book, I think, on those that I was selling. I've done the print-on-demand version for some books as we kind of test it out and see how we are able to grow what we do. It's a good chance to test a book and see if people actually care about the concept or not. If it sells a lot of copy in the print-on-demand version, you can always take it out of print-on-demand and then do it through another option. And the big houses all look for books in that space.
Okay, that's a nice option. Okay, so tell us about the hybrid way of publishing. And I want everybody to know, I'm not trying to sell you on any one of these ideas. I think that I've had experience with a lot of them myself, so I can tell you what works for me, but what works for the wealthy seeker may not be what works for a really great book on leadership or something like that, you really have to think about your goals. So just know we're not pitching anything here. We're just telling you your options. So let's talk about hybrid.
Sure. So just to give you a quick idea, I would pair it back to exactly what Jane said. We take about 3% of the books that come in and are submitted to us. This is by no means us trying to go out and look for new books, but if we can teach people and give good information, that'd be very valuable for everybody, I think. The hybrid model is meant to try and take the best of all worlds, where we give our clients the rights to all the books. The difference when you have traditionally, obviously, you give all of your rights to the traditional houses, and they can then sell your ebook rights, your paperback rights, your audio, all those sorts of things. And that becomes pretty risky, especially if you are your brand, or if this book is your brand. If you title it and they decide they want to take it in a different direction, they want to release a new edition with a co-author, you can really give up a lot of rights. So we find a lot of speakers and famous business folks who really want to keep their rights and maintain that project for themselves. A lot of people come for the hybrid approach after they've been traditionally published and say, wow, I really kind of got the short end of the stick with a big house. I'd like to do this on my own next time, but I don't want to have to deal with all the hassle.
Right. And I've heard a lot of complaints around they didn't meet my expectations in terms of actually promoting the book. And that's, I think most people go in thinking that they're going to do something, but it ends at printing and distribution, really.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and every publisher is the same. No matter who you use, you will be promoting your book. That's just a stark reality. There's no two ways about it. You will be promoting your own book. You will be spending the money in the marketing. Anyone else telling you otherwise is either lying to you or probably trying to sell you something.
And what would you say, just since we were talking about money a little bit ago, what would you say a marketing budget might be?
That's a great question. We've seen people spend a couple $1,000s on the book marketing budget. We've had clients who spent well over $1 million on marketing one book, between PR costs and advertising costs.
Wow.
There's no right answer to that. Yeah, that was a little too much, I think. We advised against spending that much on it, but it's interesting to find the number of different ways that people will try and market their products, and that could be through publicity, that could be through mass mailings or through emails or through good campaigns. The latest, hottest way to market a book is through the blog world and the blogosphere and trying to get bloggers to write about your book. That will always change, and that will always be kind of in flux. But the real trick is not to try one thing and then quit. It's to constantly be trying different things. So the best marketing budget is a monthly budget where you're just pouring a little bit at trying different things. You might try Google AdWords one month. You might try a print ad one time. Try different ways and multiple different ways to do it.
Okay. So you don't need to have $50,000 necessarily in today's marketing world with so much online availability, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I think now spending money on marketing is less and less important. Spending time on it is more and more important.
That's a really good point. Really good. Okay, so talk us through what a hybrid publisher will help someone do. And I do understand that there are groups that do it differently than you do.
Sure. Generally, most hybrid publishers, and I would group us in this group, will take a look at the manuscript that comes in, will evaluate it, and see if it's a good fit for the sales model. Again, we are very selective in the books that we take and try and only get the best of the books for our sales reps and the groups that we sell to. But a good hybrid publisher will take that book, evaluate it, make editorial recommendations for you, and then help you go through the actual editing process, design the book, both the cover and the interior, and then find a good printer for the book, help you print the books in the right quantity, and that's really important. All too often people look at a printing number and say, well, I can save so much per unit if I print 100,000 books. Not even factoring in the cost of capital or the cost of warehousing, insurance, all these sorts of things that just really can tear you up. I'd much rather have you print fewer copies in the front end and go back to press.
Gotcha. So you need to look at the total number, not the cost per book.
That's exactly right. And in some cases you might be able to save 4 cents a book. Well, warehousing can get pretty expensive. So you might be spending more than 4 cents a book to warehouse a thing per month. So it's something you have to be very careful about. That's something that a good hybrid publisher will help you evaluate as well. Now, the author will pay for each of those services. in theory, they should be paying less than the going rate because the hybrid publisher either has contacts and can buy in volume or, in fact, employs those people. We've got 38 folks here in the office who do a lot of the work to help get this work done. And it's not the services side is not really a profit center for us, but it does help provide our clients with the best possible products, which is why we do it.
So once the book is printed, then your job is not even close to done, though, right?
That's exactly right. So the hybrid publisher for you will help you get the book distributed into the major outlets, get it up on Amazon, get it into the airports, get it into the bookstores, and deal with the logistics. So making sure that your orders are picked, packed, and shipped and dealt with so that you don't have to deal with that part of it. Just about everything else, though, is on your shoulders. So whether the publisher is doing any marketing for you or not, it's still going to be on your shoulders to go out and tell people about the book. And the most common complaint in the book industry is have people say, well, that publisher didn't do anything for me. And I think that it's not really a valid complaint because everyone needs to understand the publisher is never going to help you market the book. That's something for you to do on your own.
So your goal is to be out there marketing, speaking, so that you're driving the bookstore sales or the online sales or the back of the room sales.
That's exactly right. It is all in the author's job and responsibility, and frankly, in most cases, whether it's hybrid or self-publishing, the author will make a lot more money per book sold doing that option.
Okay. And let's talk briefly, some of the selling venues, like, say, airports, you have to pay extra to get your book in there, don't you?
That's right. Almost any time you see a book's cover facing out, someone has paid for that placement. It's really pay to play. They call it co-op, which is a euphemism the book industry likes to use, but there's nothing co-op about it. Whether you're going to be on the airport, any airport store in the country, or whether you're going to be at Barnes & Noble on that main table when you first walk in, you're going to pay for that space. Interestingly enough, there are a lot more people who are willing to pay for that space than there actually is space. Every day there are about 2,000 books released into the market. That's a lot of books. A lot of those people want to have their books on that front space at Barnes & Noble. So even though they charge for it, you have to be invited to be able to have the opportunity to pay for that space.
It's a privilege.
Exactly. So, yeah, you get a privilege to be able to spend several $1,000s a month just to get your books up on that spot.
Okay. So really one of the main things when deciding what kind of publishing process you want to use would probably come down to distribution, whether or not it's important for you to get your book into bookstores. You can self-publish it and follow it all the way through to distribution, which is, I find, finding a distributor to be very, very difficult. I went out to Book Expo, researched it quite a bit. Would you say that finding distribution on your own is relatively difficult?
It really is. In most cases, if you have 1 or 2 books or even 10 books, the average bookstore, the average outlet does not want to deal with you. The same way that Apple has aggregators for all the iTunes stuff they're dealing with. They don't want to deal with one-off folks. It's an accounting and paperwork hassle. It's a customer hassle. It's just too much work. So they want to go through aggregators, and that aggregator becomes a distributor and will actually make the job easier for the main outlet, the bookstores and those folks. So it's very hard for an individual to go out and get that same sort of service.
Which is also part of the reason why the industry is so dysfunctional, because there's so many middlemen, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so when you think about it, the content provider creates content and wants to give it to someone who's going to pay them for that content. It makes sense intuitively to have 1 or 2 people in between. I think that's most content providers are willing to allow that. What really gets problematic is when there's about 10, as the book industry often has, which gets really, really, really expensive for everybody along the way, and the author is left holding a very small portion of their intellectual property and the rights to that.
Right. Okay. All right. So you're looking at different things when you're trying to decide which model is right for you, one of them being distribution. And if you choose that, hey, I don't need to have my book in every bookstore, then maybe you'll just self-publish and put it on Amazon and have it on your own website and sell it back of the room. The real goal here for all the people on the line with me, Clint, is that they're out speaking to audiences and that the organizer of the event that they're speaking at says, well, let's just buy a book for everybody in the audience. Okay, great, 250 books. So that's that's really the goal from me and my clients, that they are out there speaking to larger audiences, and they're selling their books that way, back of the room. So it could be that for a lot of them, self-publishing is the right way to go. But then there's going to be those who have this great book on leadership that want to get it out into the bookstores, perhaps a hybrid idea, or a big-name publisher that is going to be their route. So hopefully we're giving them enough information that they can make a decision on that.
Yeah, it's really important to know that there's no judgment with any model. Each of them is good and bad in their own ways. So the most important thing is to figure out what you want and what's best for you, and then tie the best approach for you into the best option for you. And that's pretty easy to do once you decide really why you want a book. If you just want to be a New York Times best-selling novelist, I would never recommend anything other than traditional publishing. And if you just want to sell books back of room, if you have a workbook that ties into your speech, I think you self-publish that, keep it simple, do it back of room, and never let it see the light of a bookstore, because there's really no need to go do that.
Okay, good. So let's talk about what's going on in the industry right now. What if I said, I'm just going to publish my book as an e-book? What would be the pros and cons to doing that?
That's a great question. I think no one will probably do just an e-book anymore, because you can also create, when you do the e-book, you can very easily create a print-on-demand book as well. So if someone wants to go out and buy an e-book, you can usually always buy the physical book that goes along with it. And that's from a design feature. As soon as you have the files created for an e-book, you're basically ready to create a book for printing as well.
Okay. So now, even if you POD it, you can still print it.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
And so what usually ends up happening is you've got a book that is available in the iTunes bookstore and on the Kindle store, and people are able to go out and get it. If they really want to go out and get a physical book, they can still order that. But generally speaking, the book is available to a relatively limited group of people. I think we've all kind of, most speakers that I know at least, travel way too much, probably have a Kindle or an iPad, or at least know 100 people who do. The average person is still not buying that many e-books.
Okay.
I think it was about 12% of book sales came from e-books in the past few months. And the interesting part there is, we'd all kind of believed it would be about 5%. So the number really was blown out of the water, but we're still looking at only about 12% of all book sales are going through e-books.
Now, why did I hear that last year e-books came up to 50% of traditional books? Was that a
wasn't... Well, it's a pretty good quote. It was actually from Amazon. What Amazon said, they sold more e-books than they did hardcover books. Amazon is the only person selling the Kindle, and they sell fewer hardcover books than they do actual Kindles. So their number is skewed a little bit, because obviously Barnes & Noble doesn't sell any Kindle e-books. It doesn't sell very many of their own e-books. Certainly Books A Million and Borders do not sell e-books as well. So in general, they're still selling more through the physical bookstore, but the number is inverting quickly.
Okay. So good to know. So maybe, and we'll talk about maybe what we see coming down the pike 10 years from now. Okay, so ebook versus traditional, you're probably going to end up printing it anyway. If I do up a Word document and switch it over to a PDF, that is not going to fly as an ebook, correct?
Not right now. We're getting closer and closer, and I think probably the next version of Word that comes out, there will probably be an ebook button that creates an EPUB file and does it pretty easily. Back in the day, creating a PDF from a Word doc was pretty hard to do. And now it's very easy to basically click of a button. So I think
I'm not talking about the technology. I'm talking about the quality of the actual product. My theory is, if you're going to do a book, do it well.
Yeah.
Don't put out something that's kind of shoddy.
Gotcha. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, so what we'd say is that just slapping together a rough draft of a book and calling it an e-book is a really dangerous thing. Some people say you just need to get a book out there. Don't worry too much about the quality or anything like that. I think that's a terrible bit of advice. The thing is, you're attaching your name to this, and this is going to be who you are. If you just slap something together, it's like going out on a date and not really getting dressed or showered up and just wearing sweatpants and a T-shirt and hoping that someone finds the inner you. It's a really bad bet to do that. I think you need to make sure the book is as perfect as possible, to make sure the content is really good, and that you're really doing a good job of showing people why you are worth getting paid for your content.
Okay, so proper cover design, proper interior design, even if it's an ebook?
You bet. Yeah, interior design is still really important. You know, the Kindle does a lot of reformatting, so no matter how the book is formatted when it goes to the Kindle store, you can manipulate the way that you see it on your screen.
Okay.
The iPad is a little bit different. The iPad shows you the way it was designed. People still want to see a visually appealing book. It's not just free-form text. You just want to see it flowing and not really being too interested in it. So I think it's really important to do a very good job of that on the front end.
Okay, good. So they might be changing it now on the Kindle, but maybe over time they'll start to take the idea into account that people really enjoy a distinctive interior design.
Right. So if you look at different books, and we've done this in-house, where we'll take one of our books that's on both Kindle and iPad, it's shocking how different it is when you see a book on the Kindle where it looks kind of like an very old computer screen made from the 80s. And the iPad looks much more like a modern computer screen where you can capture all the color and you can see all the different vibrancy there.
Okay, so down the road, that's going to improve, I'm sure of it. So, okay, my point is that I think the book cover design is still a really, really important piece of the puzzle, even if people are buying it an electronic version. So let's talk about some of the features of a good, solid book cover. What does it need to have? Jazz hands on the front?
I think that the idea that the author photo needs to be on the front cover, I would usually argue that pretty hard. Unless you are a household name, if you are someone like a major news personality, you probably don't need to have your picture on the front cover of the book. Unless you're really trying to brand yourself and it's part of a much larger campaign. But if you want to try and convince me that you need to be on the front cover of your book, I'm going to have a hard time believing that. It's going to take a lot of sales to convince me of that. Usually people say, well, I did see that John Maxwell is on the front cover of his book, and so I'd like to be like the next John Maxwell, so I should be on the front cover of the book. The problem is it's really your only sales opportunity. Again, you can go back to dating on this, where someone walks into a bar and you have to make sure you put your best foot forward. In a lot of cases, your best foot is not just a picture of you on the front cover of a book. Your best foot is probably for you to try and attract the attention of people, and the right kind of people. So if you're doing a business book, you probably don't want to have a cartoon on the front cover. If you're doing a humor book, you probably don't want to have a bar graph on the cover.
Okay.
It's really important to attract the right audience. And one of the things that we do here in the office is that we'll talk to the buyers at Barnes & Noble and Borders and ask them very carefully, do you like the cover of this book? And if they say, I do not, we say, wow, neither do we. We're going to go make changes immediately. And we go back and redesign the cover and make sure that it's something that they're attracted to.
Okay. So if you want to have a picture, back cover is better.
Yes, I think a picture on the back cover is always a good idea, or the inside flap if you do a hardcover.
Okay. Fair enough.
You want to have testimonials that will tell people that you are as great as you are. So you want to have it be a name that hopefully people recognize, or at least people in your industry and your space recognize. Your Aunt Sally saying that you're a really bright young man is probably not going to be as valuable as someone in the industry who says this person is a major thought leader.
Okay. And like maybe one testimonial on the front and a few more on the back, or how would you do that?
Yeah, I like one on the front and 3 to 5 on the back, depending on space.
Fair enough.
And if you can spread it out a little bit, so let's say you're doing a business book, you might want to have an academic, you might want to have an actual business person on there, you might want to have a celebrity. You can kind of sprinkle it around a little bit, but you don't want to have 3 people from Xerox talking about your book unless it's just for Xerox.
Okay, fair enough. And in terms of titles and subtitles, what are some I know it's hard to really get into them in any deep way, but what are some examples of really good titles, and what are some bad examples?
Let's see. I think probably the best example of a title I can tell you about is a book that we did several years ago called Enzymes for Autism. It's a really clear, simple title, and if your kids have autism and you want to know about different enzymes to feed them, it's a very good book for that. It's very niche, but it very clearly tells you what it's about. People often tell me, well, Blink is such a brilliant title that Gladwell came up with for his book. It is a great title, and it works well because we all know about Blink. When it first came out, no one had a freaking clue what Blink was. And the shiny asterisk on the front cover was nice, and you looked at it, but until you heard a lot of people talking about it, it wasn't something that you knew what it was about. So the subtitle is really important. I guess you can get away with a cutesy, short, or pithy, or flashy title if your subtitle is really descriptive. And so if your subtitle does a really good job explaining the point of the book, it's a lot better. But I think it's always best if you're doing nonfiction to try and be pretty simple and clear with the content. Don't bludgeon anybody over the head with it, but be very clear with what the title is so that you know what it is.
Okay, fair enough. What about in terms of substance? We could talk about, the made-to-stick book or Gittimer's Little Red Book of Selling. What about those? It makes them good sellers.
Well, actually, Made to Stick is a great book, and there's a funny backstory behind that. I'm sure everybody's seen that. That's the bright orange book with a piece of gray duct tape on the front cover of it. And actually, the duct tape is embossed, so you can actually feel the threads on there. When the folks at Random House first showed the galley, which is the rough edition of the book, to the authors, Chip and Dan saw it and said, "You people have Post-it notes all over the front cover of the book." And they said, "Yeah, Made to Stick. It's a sticky kind of concept." And they just shook their heads and thought, "Oh my God, these people don't get it." I mean, the book is not about something you can take off and place all over the place. Not that kind of stick. It's made to stick. It's something that really is ingrained in your mind. And so Chip goes to the store, pulls out a piece of duct tape, and just puts it over the front cover of the book and says, "I want something like this." And luckily, that's what they went out and did.
They had to fight hard for it, though.
Yeah. It wasn't that easy to do, and they had to explain the concept. That's one of the things that it's not that easy to convince the publishers of the way that you want to do it. But it was a very cool way that they learned that process of it.
Yeah.
But the content itself is really important too. If you want to go out and research really good content, that's the magic of a really good book. You can't just tell stories about Southwest Airlines. You can't just tell a quote about how Google allows people to work 20% of their time on side projects. If it's something that everybody knows, you're going to lose a lot of value. But as far as core content goes, you want to be a little bit new, a little bit different. Make sure that the points tie very clearly to what you're trying to explain to folks.
Okay. Very good. Well, listen, I see that we're actually only have about 10 minutes left, so let's talk really quickly about where the industry is heading. Big changes, brick and mortar stuff. What's going on right now, and what do you see coming down the pipe?
Sure. Well, for the last 580 years or so, since Gutenberg invented movable type, we were putting ink on paper, and then we sold books. And that was the book industry, and it didn't really change a hell of a lot. And recently now, the e-book world has made people get a little concerned, a little bit wondering, well, what do we do next, and how does this change the game? There are a lot of changes coming, and I think we're going to see e-books become a big deal. We're going to see people a lot more concerned about the price points. If you remember last year, around Christmas time, Walmart was fighting with Target to try and get every book at $10, which was going to kill all the major bookstores in the world, basically, because the prices are going to come down so much. All these things are going to be big, large changes, and trying to predict those is going to be very tough. What I can tell you is that in the long run, I think we'll see more e-books and fewer printed books. But the really good news is that content is still king. What people write and how they write it is still going to be immensely important. If you think back to the days when we had 8 tracks and then we switched over to cassette, think of Kenny Rogers not really caring at all about whether you bought the 8-track or the cassette of his latest songs. He just cared that you actually bought his stuff. And he didn't get too caught up in whether it was going to be in even a CD or a record, an LP or any of this kind of stuff, or even the MP3. As long as he got paid for it, that was the most important piece. So I think the author needs to focus on a way to make sure that there's a secure way to keep their content, and that they're not getting it stolen from them. But generally that has not been a problem in books as it was in music. We've done a pretty good job to guard ourselves against a lot of those problems. I think the most important thing is to focus on content and let the industry do what it does as far as the dissemination of it.
Okay. Well, that's been very, very helpful. Let me just move us into Q&A mode. Okay, if you would like to ask a question of Clint, press star 6 on your phone, and you will be unmuted, and you can go ahead and just introduce yourself first.
Jane, this is
Hello,
Margaret
clear?
McDonald.
Okay, let's go with Margaret first, and then I heard a second person will get you next. Go ahead, Margaret.
Hi, thanks for pulling this together today. Under the hybrid publishing, I felt like I got kind of a fast explanation of how the hybrid publisher helps you get it distributed, and it's sort of after the author pays for each of the services. I heard the hybrid publisher will help you get it distributed and things like that, but I didn't really catch the details. Can you help me understand what type of help you would expect from a hybrid publisher in those steps?
Yeah, sure. So a hybrid publisher will help you get your book made available into all the outlets who are out there in the world. And that means all the wholesalers, all the retailers, the libraries, anybody who might go out and buy a book. It's a hybrid publisher's and their distributor's job to make sure that everybody in the world knows your book is out there.
But what I'm asking is, what does that help look like?
Okay, sure. So they will talk
Talk through the catalog, Clint, all the way through the buying process.
Yeah, so most publishers will put out, most hybrid publishers will put out a catalog, which is a listing of all the books that are coming out that season. They will send those catalogs out to all the sales reps who sell to the different outlets and try and get opening buys from the major outlets like Barnes & Noble, Borders, Amazon, that sort of thing. They will talk to your international reps and everyone else around the world who might be willing to buy that and try and get them to make pre-orders. Then they will facilitate logistical shipping of the books to those people, the accounting of the orders, and then dealing with, God forbid, returns that come back after those sales if they don't come through as well as we'd like.
What about expos, book expos, stuff like that? You guys have a representation there as well?
Yes. Book Expo used to be a really big deal. It used to be a good place to go write orders. Now it is a place for the book industry to kind of watch itself die. There aren't a whole lot of books being sold at Book Expo anymore. Traditionally, for example, we have 29 sales reps around the country who go to their major outlets on a regular basis and sell our books to them. There's no real need for an annual conference because the buyer at Barnes & Noble has seen our books a couple times a month, every month, throughout the course of the year. So when we see them at the actual trade show, it's more a chance to say hi, maybe grab a beer, and not focus too much on the actual sales process. But it's really an important thing to make sure there's a good relationship between the buyers and the distributor. With either, some hybrid folks have their own distributor, and some use an outside source. We are our own distributor, and that's important to have a good tie there. But you want to make sure that people know who is going to be out selling your book and how they plan on selling the book, to whom they will be selling it, and how frequently. If someone says, well, I mailed your stuff to Barnes & Noble, that is not distribution. Real distribution and real book sales is trying to get it in front of the rep, to get the rep to tell you how many copies they're going to buy, and possibly tell you, hey, we might need to make some changes to this if you really want to sell it. I don't like this chapter here at all. I don't like the title, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Does that help answer your question?
Margaret?
Sort of. I mean, it sounds a little bit like you're in the catalog gets sent out, and then you're still one of dozens or one of hundreds. So I'm not really hearing very much specific information on how an author knows that somebody's out there really helping to get their book known.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, that's a better question. Let me clarify that. A distributor will not go out and get your book known. That's really the author's job. A distributor will make your book available so the buyers can go out and buy the books. But they will not go out and hand it to everybody, show it to them, and let them see the book and make sure that someone spends a lot of time with it. Usually you get about 30 to 40 seconds per book in the catalog when you go to Barnes & Noble. Maybe the big houses might get up to a minute of time in front of the buyers. But in most cases, no one's really getting that really close one-on-one attention. And that's where the author's focus usually comes in.
So your goal is to be out there and be present through media attention, PR, and that type of thing to help drive that, and to help the bookstores see that they need to carry it if they're not already.
Okay. Right, because keep in mind there's 2,000 books a day being hitting out there. So when we meet with them every 2 weeks, they're looking at, 28,000 books or so worth of data. They want to know why they should carry your book instead of the other 27,999 books that are out there. And the best way to convince them of doing it is by telling them that you're going to be out doing a lot of media, you're going to be marketing the book. They just want to be part of a winning team. So that's the only reason why they actually have the store there. is to try and glom onto the media that you're doing. They're not going to go out and create new media for you in order to do that.
Okay.
Okay, so there was someone else who came on at the same time as Margaret. Let's see if we can get you back for your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Brent in Texas.
Hi, Brent.
Yes, hi there, Clint. I was just going to say thank you for your unbiased sharing on the different publishers. My quick question is, my first book was self-published about 3 years ago, and there's so many things that I want to do differently with that book now. And my question is it better to revise it or to actually make it into a new book?
Good question. I would ask you first, where did you sell the book in the first case? Was it in distribution, or was it just something you sold on your own?
Mainly on my own at speaking appointments, engagements, and then it's up on Amazon.
Okay. If it's up on Amazon, I would say go ahead and do a new edition of the book. Rather than revise it, I'd either call it a full-on second edition, or I would just call it, give it a new title. There's a lot of things you want to change. If you don't like what it is in its current form, you might want to go out and make some new changes to it, put a different cover, a different title. I've done 4 different editions of my book, and they've all had different titles and different content and different covers and that kind of stuff. So it's important to kind of change it around so that no one lumps it together with the first book that you've done.
Good question.
Thanks.
Brent, that's a good question, and it also brings up a point of, knowing what your book wants to be when it grows up. And if there's enough interest, I'll tell you what, send me an email to jane@speakerlauncher.com if you'd like to see more on book development. And perhaps I'll try to bring in someone like a Sam Horn to walk us through, really learning what your book wants to be when it grows up, because I've gone through that myself as well, where not with The Wealthy Speaker, with another book, I was uncertain, and boy, did it came through in the scatteredness of the writing. So we have time for probably one, maybe even 2 more questions. Go ahead.
Hi,
Go ahead.
this is, can I ask a question, Jane? Steve Reeser?
Go ahead, Steve.
2 questions. On the hybrid services, are hybrid services generally an upfront cost, or do they come out of the sale of the book? I kind of already know the answer, but I'm just curious. And the second question is, would it be fair to say that a hybrid publisher, in essence, acts as an agent?
Okay, 2 good questions. I'll hit the agent one first. A hybrid publisher, I guess sort of you could say, acts like an agent in that they'll try and help you get your book out there, but a hybrid publisher will not try and get you into Random House. In fact, they'll try and be an agent for sale and help you sell your book to a lot of different outlets. As far as the other question about the cost, most hybrid publishers will charge an upfront fee for services as well as a distribution fee, which is a portion of book sales that come through. The important thing there is to make sure that you're talking to a hybrid publisher and not a vanity publisher. A vanity publisher makes almost all their money in the front end, doesn't really care about back-end sales, and is not going to create a book for long-term use. I would recommend that for everybody who does this, make sure you're paying attention to a publisher who is interested in selling a whole lot of copies of your book and makes the majority of their profits by doing that, not by creating services.
So their design and the contract and the deal is a more well-rounded, it's an upfront fair share, but then they also are part of the team when it wins.
That's right, yeah. If the author's going to retain all the rights to it, I think it's fair and reasonable for the publisher to be paid for the creative services piece. But if the publisher is only making money on creative services, I would be kind of highly suspect of why they're doing it that way. I like to partner with really good books and know that I can make a hell of a lot more money by selling a really good book a lot of times and getting a piece of those sales than I can by designing a cover or by editing a book. I'd much rather be getting passive income than doing all the work myself.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And this brings us right up on the hour, so I am going to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule, Clint, to be with us here today.
Glad to be here.
Sorry. I'm going to go ahead and put us back into conversation mode so that people can say thanks for being on the line with us here today. And before we go, though, Clint, what should people do if they're interested in getting involved with Greenleaf or have some questions for you guys? What's the best way for them to go?
Sure. Best thing to do is go to greenleafbookgroup.com, and you can see us up on there, all of our information. We also have a blog called the Big Bad Book Blog with tons of free information. Again, our intent is to try and give as much data as we can to get really educated folks to know about publishing first, and then if we can find a good fit for us, great, that comes up second. So if there's ever any questions, let us know. I'd be happy to answer your questions as well.
Do you have something listed on how to submit your proposal if they wanted to get in front of you?
Yep, there's a button called... Yep, there's a button for submissions. You just click on submissions, you fill out the online form, and you can either email or mail the book to us, and we review it. There's no cost for us to review it.
Great. Well, let me go back into conversation mode here. So, Clint, thank you very much for taking his time out today, and we'll see you again soon, Wealthy Speakers. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speakers Show. Please visit speakerlauncher.com for your free Wealthy Speaker audit, and visit speakerlauncher.com/podcast for show notes and many more resources to help you catapult your speaking business. See you soon, Wealthy Speakers.